Hello students, now we are going to see the subject of commerce. Unit 1, Fundamentals of Business. Under this, classification of business activities. So, industry, commerce and trade are the subtopics. Classification of business activities. Introduction. The manufacturers produce the goods for the consumers at one point of location. They distribute the goods to final consumer through intermediaries like wholesalers, retailers, distributors and the like. All these processes taking place from the point of production to the point of consumption are collectively called as business activities. All business activities can be classified into two broad categories, that is industry and commerce. Next one, industry. Industry refers to economic activities which are connected with conversion of resources into useful goods. The production side of business activity is referred as industry. It includes activities relating to producing or processing of goods as well as breeding and raising of animals. The term industry is also used to mean group of firms producing similar or related goods. That is called to be as an industry. For example, cotton textile industry refers all manufacturing units producing textile goods from cotton. Similarly, electronic industry would include all firms producing electronic goods and so on. Further, in common parlance, certain services like banking and insurance are also referred to as industry. Would say banking industry, insurance industry, etc. The next topic is kinds of industries. Industries has been classified into two, that is on the basis of activity, on the basis of size. Under this on the basis of activity, it has been classified into primary, secondary and tertiary. Under this primary, it is classified into extraction industry and genetic industry. Under secondary, it is classified into manufacturing and construction. And under manufacturing, it is classified into analytical, synthetical and processing. And under on the basis of size, it is classified into micro, small, medium and large. Now we are going to see on the basis of activities. Industries may be divided into three wide categories, namely primary industries, secondary industries and tertiary industries. First we are going to see primary industry. Primary industry is concerned with production of goods with the help of nature. It is a nature-oriented industry which requires very little human effort. For example, agriculture, farming, forestry, fishing, horticulture, etc. The next one is extractive industries. These industries extract or draw out products from natural sources. Extractive industries supply some basic raw materials that are mostly products of geographical or natural environment. Important extractive industries include farming, mining, oil drilling, hunting and fishing operations. The next is genetic industries. These industries remain engaged in breeding plants and animals for their use in further reproduction. The seeds, nursery companies, poultry, dairy, piggery, hatcheries, nursery, fisheries, apiary, etc. are the classic examples for the genetic industries. The next one is secondary industries. These are concerned with using the materials which have already been extracted at the primary stage. These industries process such materials to produce goods for final consumption or for further processing by other industrial units. For example, mining of an iron ore is a primary industry, but manufacturing of steel by way of further processing of raw irons is a secondary industry. The next one is manufacturing industries. These industries are engaged in producing goods through processing of raw materials and thus creating farm utilities. They bring out diverse finished products which we consume or use through the conversion of raw materials or partly finished materials in their manufacturing operations. Now we are going to see analytical industry. It analyzes and separates different elements from the same materials as in the case of oil refinery. Synthetic industry. Synthetic industry means which combines various ingredients into a new product as in the case of a cement. The next one is processing industry, which involves successive stages for manufacturing finished products as in the case of sugar and paper. And the last one is assembling industry. Assembling industry which assembles different components parts to make a new product as in the case of television, car, computer, etc. The next one is construction industries. These industries are involved in the construction of building, dams, bridges, roads as well as tunnels and canals. Next, tertiary industries or service industries. They do not produce goods. These industries produce utility services and sell them at a profit. They help trade, industry and commerce. This term also includes auxiliaries to trade like banking, insurance, warehouse, advertisement, etc. Next, we are going to see the classification of tertiary industries. Under this, the first one is personalized service. Individuals and private institutions selling their services to others. For example, plumber, servant maid, etc. And the second one is public service. Government hospitals, schools, police, government offices, etc. provide services to the public on behalf of the government without profit motive. And the third one is distributive service. Transportation, warehousing, logistics, salesmanship, etc. will come under this type of service. And the fourth one is financial service. Banking, factoring, accounting and insurance, etc. are grouped under this type of service. And the fifth one is quaternary service. Under this, professional or specialized skills and high technology are used to provide this type of service. For example, software development, auditing, research and development, etc. And the last one is quinary service. Under this, new ideas are generated, new technologies are evolved, new policies are implemented by selected individual experts. Their decisions influence nations, international institutions, etc. That is inventors. The next, we are going to see on the basis of size. Under this, on the basis of size or scale of operations industries, it may be classified into four, that is micro industries, small industries, medium industries and the last one is large industries. The next topic we are going to see is commerce. Commerce refers to all those activities which are necessary for bringing goods from the place of production to the place of their consumption. According to Evelyn Thomas, commercial operations deal with the buying and selling of goods, the exchange of commodities and the contribution of finished products. Commerce includes not only trade but also services such as transport, warehousing, packaging, insurance, banking and sales promotion, which are incidental or auxiliaries to trade. That is called to be as a commerce. The next one is trade. Trade is an essential part of commerce. The term trade is used to denote buying and selling. It helps in making the goods produced available to ultimate consumers or users. Therefore, one who buys and sells is a trader. A trader is a middleman between the producer and the consumer. Trade may be classified into internal trade and external trade, wholesale trade or retail trade. Next, transportation. Selling all the goods produced at or near the production place is not possible. Hence, goods are to be sent to different places where they are demanded. The medium which moves men and materials from one place to another is called to be as an transport. Next, banking. Nowadays, we cannot think of business without bank. To start the business or to run it smoothly, we require money. Banks supply money. Business activities cannot be undertaken unless funds are available for acquiring assets, purchasing raw materials and meeting other expenses. Necessary funds can be obtained from the bank. The next one is insurance. Business involves various types of risk. Factory building, machinery, furniture, etc. must be protected against fire, theft and other risk. Materials and goods held in stock or in transit are subject to the risk of loss or damage. Employees are also required to be protected against the risk of accident and occupational hazards. Thus, insurance provides protection in all such cases. And the last one is warehousing. Usually, goods are not sold or consumed immediately after production. They are held in stock to make them available as and when required. Special arrangements must be made for storage of goods to prevent loss or damage. Warehousing helps business firms to overcome the problem of storage and facilities the availability of goods when needed. This is called to be as a warehousing. The next is comparison between industry, commerce and trade. The first one is meaning. Under industry, extraction, reproduction, conversion, processing and construction of useful products. Under commerce, activities involving distribution of goods and services. And under trade, purchase and sales of goods and services. The second difference is scope. Under industry, it consists of all activities involving conversion of materials and semi-finished products into finished goods. And under commerce, it comprises trade, auxiliaries to trade. And under trade, it comprises exchange of goods and services. And the third difference is capital. Under industry, generally large amount of capital is required. Under commerce, need for capital is comparatively less. And under trade, small capital is needed to maintain stock and to grant credit. And the fourth difference is risk. Under industry, risk involved is usually high, and under commerce, relatively less risk is involved, and under trade, relatively less risk is involved. And the fifth difference is side. Under industry, it represents supply side of goods and services. Under commerce, it represents demand side of goods and services. Under trade, it represents both the supply and demand. And the sixth difference is utility creation. Under industry, it creates form utility by changing the form or shape of materials. And under commerce, it creates place utility by moving goods from producers to consumers. And under trade, it creates possession utility through exchange. So these are the comparison between the industry, commerce and trade. Now, Unit 2, Forms of Business Organization. Under this, Sole Proprietorship. So the subtopics are Introduction, Definition of Sole Trader, Characteristics and Advantages and Disadvantages of Sole Proprietorship. Now, Sole Proprietorship Introduction. A business organization is an organization which is engaged in some industrial or commercial activity. It represents an institutional arrangement for carrying on any kind of business activity. It may be owned and controlled by a single individual or by a group of individuals who have entered into a formal or informal agreement to jointly conduct the business. So this is the introduction for sole proprietorship. And the next one is definition. According to Wheeler, a business undertaking is a concern, company or enterprise which buys and sells, is owned by one person or a group of persons, and is managed under a specific set of operating policies. Sole trading business. Sole proprietorship is a form of business organization in which an individual introduces his own capital, uses his own skill and intelligence in the management of its affairs, and is solely responsible for the results of its operations. The individual alone may run the business or may obtain the assistance of employees. It is the first stage in the evolution of the forms of organization and is thus the oldest among them. This is called to be as a sole trading business. Now we can see the forms of organization. Under forms of organization, it has been classified into two types, that is non-corporate enterprises and corporate enterprises. And under non-corporate enterprises, it is subdivided into sole trading concern, partnership firms and joint Hindu family business. And under corporate enterprises, it is subdivided into government, private and cooperative. And under government, it is subdivided into public undertakings and public utilities. And under private, it is subdivided into joint stock companies. So these are the forms of business organization. Thus, the sole proprietorship is also known as individual entrepreneurship. To raise the required capital, the individual may depend mostly on his own savings, or else he may borrow part or whole from his friends or relatives or financial institutions. There are no legal formalities to be gone through except those required for a particular type of business. For example, if one wants to start a restaurant, he has to obtain a license from the health department of the municipal corporations. Next is definition. Sole trader is a type of business unit where a person is solely responsible for providing the capital, for bearing the risk of the enterprise and for the management of business. It was said by J.L. Hansen. And the second definition is sole proprietorship is that form of business organization which is owned and controlled by a single individual. He receives all the profits and risk all of his property in the success or failure of the enterprise. And this is the definition which was given by Wheeler. The next one is characteristics. Under this characteristics, the first point is ownership by one man. Under this heading itself, it is easily understood. This is owned by single person. The sole trader contributes the required capital. He is not only the owner of the business but also the manager of the entire affairs. And the second characteristic is freedom of work and quick decisions. Since the individual is himself as a owner, he need not consult anybody else. Hence, he can take the quick decisions. This is called to be as a freedom of work and quick decision. The third point is unlimited liability. When his business assets are not sufficient to pay off the business debts, he has to pay from his personal property. And the fourth one is enjoying entire profit. He strives tirelessly for the improvement and expansion of his business and enjoys all the benefits of his hard work. And the fifth one is absence of government regulation. A sole proprietor concern is free from government regulations. No legal formalities are to be observed in its formation, management or in its closure. Sixth point is no separate entity. The sole trading concern comes to an end with death, disability, insanity and insolvency of the individual. And the last point is maintenance of secrecy. Since he or she manages all the affairs of the business, the secrecy can be maintained easily. Now we are going to see the advantages of sole trader. Under this, the first one is easy formation. No legal formalities are required to initiate a sole trading concern. Any person capable of entering into a contract can start it, provided he has the necessary resources for it. The second advantage is incentive to work hard. There is a direct relationship between effort and reward. The fact that the entire profit can be taken by himself without sharing with anybody else induces him to work ceaselessly. This is the second advantage. Next is small capital. Small capital is an important as well as specific advantage of sole proprietorship. Sole proprietor can start business with small capital. And the fourth advantage is credit standing. Since his private properties are held liable for satisfying the business debts, he can get more financial assistance from others. And the next one is personal contact with the customers. Since sole proprietor knows each and every customer individually, he can supply goods according to their taste and preferences. Thus, he can cultivate personal relationship with the customers. And the sixth advantage is flexibility. The sole trader can easily adjust himself to changing requirement of his business. This is called to be as a flexibility. Thus, these are the advantages of sole proprietorship. The next is disadvantages. Under this, the first point is limited capital. Since the capital is contributed by one individual only, business operations have necessarily to be on a limited scale. And the second demerit is limited managerial skill. Single person's intelligence and experience may not help him beyond a certain stage, since he has to focus on each and every activity. His managerial ability is bound to be limited. Third one is unlimited liability. The creditors have the right to recover their dues even from the personal property of the proprietor in case the business assets are not sufficient to pay their debts. And the fourth one is lack of specialization. Since the business unit is small and the financial resources are limited, experts in different fields cannot be employed to secure maximum advantages. And the fifth one is hasty decisions. Sole proprietor is more likely to take hasty decision as he need not consult anybody else. Thus, these are the disadvantages of sole proprietorship business. Now, Unit 2, Forms of Business Organization. Under this, we are going to see Hindu Undivided Family and Partnership. So, here so many subtopics have given. The first one is Introduction to HUF, Meaning and Definition of Partnership, Partnership Deed and its contents, Rights and Duties of Partners and its types, Procedure for Registration, Drawbacks of Non-Registration of Partnership, and the last topic is Dissolution of Partnership. Now we can see Introduction to HUF. The Joint Hindu Family Business is a distinct form of organization which is peculiar to India. Joint Hindu Family Firm is created by the operation of law. It does not have any separate and distinct legal entity from that of its members. The business of Joint Hindu Family is controlled under the Hindu law. Next, we can see the meaning of HUF. Families agree to live and work together, and they invest their resources and labor jointly and share profits or losses together. Then this family is known as Composite Family or HUF. For example, C. Roy and Company, a chartered accountant firm. Now, schools of Hindu law. There are two schools of Hindu law. One is Dayabaga, which is prevalent in Bengal and Assam, and the other is Mitakshara law. which is prevalent in the rest of the country. According to Mitakshara law, there is a son's right by birth in the property of joint family. It means when a son is born in the family, he acquires an interest in the property jointly held by the family. But today, Indian Succession Act 2005 is applicable to all male and female members of a HUF. The next is characteristics of joint Hindu family. Under this, the first point is governed by Hindu law. The business of the joint Hindu family is controlled and managed under the Hindu law. And the second point is management. All the affairs of the joint Hindu family are controlled and managed by one person who is known as Karta or manager. The Karta is the senior most male member of the family. The members of the family have full faith and confidence in Karta. And the third characteristic is membership by birth. The membership of the family can be acquired only by birth. As soon as a child is born in the family, that child becomes a member. Membership requires no consent or agreement. Fourth one is liability. Except the Karta, the liability of all other members is limited to their shares in the business. The amount of debt can be recovered from his personal property also. And the fifth characteristic is permanent existence. The death, lunacy, or insolvency of any member of the family does not affect the existence of the business of joint Hindu family. The family goes on doing its business. And the sixth one is implied authority of Karta. In a joint family firm, only Karta has the implied authority to enter into a contract for debts and pledge the property of the firm for the ordinary purpose of the businesses of the firm. This is called to be as an implied authority of Karta. The seventh point is minor also a corpus sine. In a joint Hindu family firm, even a newborn baby can be a corpus sine. And the last point is dissolution. The joint Hindu family business can be dissolved only at the will of all the members of the family. Any single member has no right to get the business dissolved. Now we are going to see the meaning and definition of partnership. Under this introduction, partnership form of organization is an extension of the sole proprietorship. It has already been explained that a sole proprietary form of organization suffers from several drawbacks such as limited capital, limited managerial ability, concentrated risk, and less chances for expansion and growth, etc. With the result, the sole trader is compelled to seek the cooperation of others so that he can meet the changing situations effectively. The person who enter into partnership are individually called partners and collectively known as firm. According to Section 4 of the Partnership Act of 1932, partnership is the relation between persons who have agreed to share the profits of a business carried on by all or any of them acting for all. So this is the definition for partnership under Partnership Act of 1932. The next definition, which was given by Professor Haney. The relations which exist between persons competent to make contracts who agree to carry on a lawful business in common with a view to private gain. According to Spiegel, partnership has two or more members, each of whom is responsible for the obligatory requirements of the partnership. Each of the partners may bind the others and the assets of the partners may be taken for debts of partnership. So these are the definition which was given by Professor Haney and Spiegel. The next is the characteristics of partnership. Under this, the first point is contractual relationship. Partnership is the result of an agreement which may be oral or written. Consequently, persons not competent to contract, for example minors, cannot form it. Second one is plurality of persons. Since partnership is the outcome of an agreement, the minimum number of persons required to form a partnership is 2 and the maximum is 50. And the third characteristic is existence of business. The partnership agreement must be to carry on lawful business or a profession. If there is no business, there can be no partnership. The fourth point is sharing profits. The business must be carried on with a view to earn profit and share it among all the partners. An agreement to undertake philanthropic activities does not constitute partnership because profit motive is completely absent. And the fifth one is mutual agency. In fact, mutual agency is the essence of partnership. Since the business is to be carried on by all or any of them acting for all, each partner acts simultaneously as a principal and an agent. Now, we are going to see the advantages. Under this, the first point is easy formation. The formation of partnership firm requires fulfillment of lesser legal formalities than other types of organization. What required is just an agreement, which can be oral or written. Registration of partnership is optional. And the second advantage is availability of larger resources. The combined capital of all the partners and the greater borrowing capacity make available larger financial resources. New partners can also be taken into partnership to secure more capital. And the third point is benefits of consultation. Two heads are better than one. Wise decision can be possible when the issues and subject matters are thoroughly discussed. There is no place for hasty decisions. And the fourth point is division of work and greater managerial efficiency. The staggering load of management work can be judiciously distributed among the partners according to their experience, knowledge and taste. For example, one partner can look after purchases, another sales, yet another accounting, etc. This ensures greater managerial efficiency. And the fifth one is reduced risk. The risk of each partner is reduced considerably since the loss sustained by the firm is shared by all the partners. This is called to be as a reduced risk. And the next point is unlimited liability and credit standing. The liability of the partner is unlimited, since apart from his business assets, even his private properties are also available for satisfying the claims of creditors. Hence, creditors may give more loans because they can get back the loan from the personal properties of sole traders. And the seventh point is safeguard of the minority interest. For all the vital matters, an unanimous consent of each partner is required. If there is no unanimity, such decisions are not accepted. And the last point is easy dissolution. The dissolution of the partnership is also very simple in the case of partnership at will. A 14 days notice by a partner in this connection is enough. No legal hurdle is there for dissolving the firm. These are the advantages of partnership. Now, we are going to see the disadvantages. Under this, the first point is lack of harmony. After a few years of working, friction and disharmony may creep in. Each partner views with one another in dishonest dealings. This mutual conflict and lack of team spirit pave the way for the dissolution of the firm. And the second one is absence of legal status and instability. The partnership firm has no separate legal existence. It is inseparable from the partners composing it. As a result, it is terminable on the death or insolvency of a partner. And the third point is limited resources. The maximum number of partners in a partnership firm is 10 in the case of banking business and 20 in other cases. In actual practice, the number will be well below this maximum because of the need for ensuring harmonious working. The next one is limited risk taking. In view of the danger of unlimited liability, the partners tend to be overcautious. So normally they do not want to assume risk starting new ventures. And the fifth point is risk of implied authority. Every partner can bind the firm and his other partners by his acts. Therefore, all other partners become liable to a greater extent because of the folly and fraud committed by a fellow partner. And the sixth point is lack of public confidence. As its accounts need not to be audited and published, it lacks public confidence. These are the disadvantages of partnership. The next is partnership deed. A partnership is formed by an agreement. This agreement may be in writing or oral. Though the law does not expressly require that the partnership agreement should be in writing, it is desirable to have it in writing in order to avoid any misunderstanding or dispute with regard to the terms of the partnership. The document which contains the term of a partnership as agreed among the partners is called to be as a partnership deed. The partnership deed is to be duly stamped as per the Indian Stamp Act, and it is duly signed by all the partners. That is called to be as a partnership deed. Now we are going to see the contents of partnership deed. So these are the contents which will comes under this partnership deed. The first one is name of the firm. The second one is nature of the proposed business. And the third one is duration of partnership. Duration of the partnership means business, whether it is to be run for a fixed period of time or whether it is to be dissolved after completing a particular venture. That is called to be as a duration of partnership. The next one is capital contribution. The capital is to be contributed by the partners. It must be remembered that capital contribution is not necessary to become a partner for one who contributes his organizing power, business acumen, managerial skill, etc. instead of capital. And the fifth point is withdrawal from the firm. The amount that can be withdrawn from the firm by each partner. And the next point is profit or loss sharing. The ratio in which the profits or losses are to be shared. If the profit sharing ratio is not specified in the deed, all the partners must share the profits and bear the losses equally. And the seventh point is interest on capital. Whether any interest is to be allowed on capital, and if so, the rate of interest. If the deed is silent on interest on capital, the rules for interest on capital in Partnership Act will take effect. And the eighth point is rate of interest on drawings. Whether any interest is to be allowed on drawings, the rate of interest is to be specified. And the ninth point is loan from partners. Whether loans can be accepted from the partners, and if so, the rate of interest payable thereon. And the 10th point is account keeping. Maintenance of accounts and audit is necessary. And the 11th point is salary and commission to partners. Amount of salary or commission payable to partners for their services. That is, unless this is specifically provided, no partner is entitled to any salary. This is called salary and commission to partners. The next one is retirement. Matters that relating to retirement of a partner. The arrangement to be made for paying out the amount due to a retired or deceased partner must also be stated. And the next point is goodwill valuation. Method of valuing goodwill on the admission, death or retirement of a partner. And the 14th point is distribution of responsibility. The work that is entrusted to each partner is better stated in the deed itself. And the next point is dissolution procedure. Procedure for dissolution of the firm and the mode of settlement of accounts thereafter should be mentioned. And the last point is arbitration of dispute. Arbitration in case of disputes among partners. The deed should provide the method for settling disputes or differences of opinion. This clause will avoid costly litigations. These are all about the contents of partnership deed. Assignment. First question is explain the characteristics of sole trading business. Explain the characteristics of sole trading business. And the second question is what are the contents of partnership deed? What are the contents of partnership deed?